My name is Peter, and I'm a 28-year-old software developer. I was feeling very lonely after a breakup. It was Christmas, and there was a void in my life. On the advice of a friend, I downloaded the Tinder app, thinking that maybe I could overcome my loneliness by meeting new people. There, I met Tracy, who seemed like a bubbly and cheerful girl in the photos. Tracy's profile was very impressive. "Christmas is my favorite season. Let's do something special." I was drawn to her energy and enthusiasm. We chatted for a few days, and Tracy suggested that she wanted to meet me and decorate a Christmas tree at my house. I had made all the preparations to welcome Tracy, cleaned my flat, bought an expensive wine, and put fairy lights around my tree. Everything looked cozy and festive. When Tracy sent a message saying she was coming, I was both excited and nervous. Tracy arrived at 7 p.m., wearing a red coat and a small smile. At first glance, I noticed something strange. Tracy looked very different from her profile photo. She wore too much makeup, and the tremor in her hands made me a little wary. The evening was strange. Tracy wasn't talking much, and while she did come in to decorate the Christmas tree, she was more focused on the kitchen and the bookshelf. At one point, she spilled wine, and when I bent down to clean up, I noticed Tracy's hands reaching for her medicine cabinet. While decorating the tree, Tracy's conversation became more and more strange. She started asking more questions about my past relationships, and when I shared a personal story, Tracy just stared with a blank expression. After a while, I started to feel dizzy. I realized that my glass was being refilled by Tracy. May woke up with a startle to find herself lying on the living room floor. The lights were off and the house was quiet. I called out to Tracy, but there was no answer. The medicine cabinet and an expensive watch were missing. The bottle of alcohol was gone. I immediately called the police. When they heard Tracy's description, they were told that there had been many complaints filed against a girl like this. Tracy was a professional con artist who would charm people and rob them in their homes. This incident brought back an old memory. When I was a child, one Christmas Eve, my younger sister Emily and I saw a Santa Claus knock on the door of their house. My mother was drunk, and we two kids were home alone. Santa said, "I'm here with presents. Open the door." I stopped my sister and said, "This is not the real Santa." She shone a flashlight near the window and saw that Santa had a strange face, with a dangerous smile and bloodshot eyes. Not having time to call the police, I acted smart and pulled an emergency fire alarm, which forced Santa to flee. A week later, my friend Mark and I moved into a remote Airbnb cabin in the Poconos. The cabin seemed perfect, but strange things started happening at night. Light tapping on a door and seeing shadows near the window began to scare us. On the second day at the cabin, a man claiming to be the host's brother came by the cabin. His name was Tom. Tom's questions made me uncomfortable, like what the plan was for their long stay at the cabin. When I messaged the Airbnb host, the reply was, "I don't have a brother." May and Mark Turrent fled the cabin. We later realized that Tom had encountered Santa Claus, which was part of my childhood anecdote I returned home, but my fear had still not gone away. One night, when I saw my reflection on the TV screen, there was a shadow behind it. The smile was the same smile I had seen on Santa and Tom's faces. Somehow this was not a story, but a warning. Fear never goes away, it just takes a new form. It was Christmas evening. The mansion was a huge Victorian-era building, standing secluded on the edge of the forest. Even from the outside, it looked eerie, crumbling walls, broken windows, and immersed in the shadows of the forest. Dark corridors. Inside the mansion, long, dark corridors snaked around. A thick layer of dust settled on the floor, and the mirrors on the walls reflected blurry images that twisted into grotesque faces. A cold wind always blew through these corridors, as if an invisible force was driving them. Old pictures hanging on the walls. The old pictures hanging on the walls had strange eyes that kept watching. These pictures often showed the distorted faces of family members, with an unknown suffering reflected in their eyes. In the darkness of the night, the eyes of these pictures seemed to come alive, as if they were seeing, listening, and knowing. Hidden rooms. The mansion had many hidden rooms, the doors to which were often locked. Strange sounds came from these rooms, whispers, rattles, and sometimes even screams. The doors to these rooms were covered in a thick layer of dust, as if they had not been opened for years. Strange objects. There were many strange objects scattered throughout the mansion: broken dolls, rusted weapons, and ancient religious objects. These objects had a peculiar energy, which instilled fear. Some of these objects would suddenly disappear and then appear somewhere else after some time, as if some invisible force was moving them. Cold wind. There would be sudden gusts of cold wind even if it was hot outside. This wind would often blow for no reason, and it would warn of an invisible danger. Darkness and silence. There was always a strange silence in the mansion, which was sometimes broken by terrifying screams. This silence was so deep that it was difficult to even breathe. A cold wind blew against the windows of the mansion. Inside, in a mansion decorated with heavy simplicity, an elderly man, James, was nearing his death. Family and friends were gathered around him, their eyes reflecting worry and sadness. James's eyes slowly closed, then suddenly opened. His voice, as weak as an elderly man's, was firm yet firm. "Listen," he said softly. "I have seen a story that has haunted me, a story that will haunt me forever." Youthful curiosity. James spoke of his youth. A curious boy who loved solving mysteries. He would get lost in libraries, immersing himself in ancient texts. One day, after his grandfather passed away, he inherited a book. It was no ordinary book. Its pages were made of parchment and had symbols written on them in an unknown language. Discovering ancient magic. Magic, a power that has been the subject of curiosity and fear for centuries in human history. It is an invisible force that seems to break the laws of nature. It is a mystery that has fascinated the human mind for centuries. A ritual in a dark room. An old dusty book is opened. Its pages are made of parchment, and strange symbols in an unknown language are engraved on them. A candle flame shakes, and a strange chill engulfs the room. The pages of the book are turned rapidly, and a complex ritual begins. Invisible powers. An invisible force is felt in the air, which moves things and creates sound. The candle flame dances in a strange way, and the shadows on the walls form scary faces. Invocation of ancient gods. During the ritual, the names of ancient gods are invoked. These gods are the epitome of darkness and evil. Their voices resound in the air, and they make strange gestures to show their power. Unintended consequences. The results of rituals are often unexpected and disastrous. The dead can be resurrected, objects can levitate, and earthquakes can occur. Curses and incantations. Magic is often used to cast curses and incantations. These curses can last for generations and can harm the victims mentally and physically. Birth of dark powers. Magic can also be used to give birth to dark powers. These powers can pose a great threat to humanity. James tried to understand this book. He spent hours searching in libraries, consulting old wise men, but no one could understand this language. Even after despairing, he was fascinated by this book. There was some strange attraction, a mystery that was pulling him. One night on Christmas, strange sounds. In the silence of the night, strange sounds were heard, whispers, rattles, and sometimes even screams. These sounds were so clear that it seemed as if someone was standing near your ear and talking. Moving shadows. Shadows kept moving on the walls, as if a human was walking there. These shadows were often human-shaped, but sometimes they were distorted and terrifying. Cold touches. Suddenly, you felt as if someone was touching your hand or shoulder, but when you looked back, there was no one there. Strange faces in the mirror. When you looked at your face in the mirror, you saw another face behind you. This face was often distorted and terrifying, and it stared right into your eyes. Changing pictures. Pictures hanging on the walls would suddenly change. Different faces would appear in the same picture, and sometimes the pictures would change completely. Thunder. Lightning would flash suddenly and then go out. This would happen when a ghost was nearby. Blow of cold wind. Suddenly, a cold wind would blow, making you shiver. This wind would often come from an empty room, and it would warn of an invisible danger. During the ritual, a violent wind suddenly blew. The doors and windows of the mansion rattled loudly. James's friends who were with him shrank in fear. Then an unimaginable event occurred. James's friend's body suddenly went cold. His eyes went blank, and his body fell to the ground. James regretted what he had done. He couldn't sleep the whole night. His eyes were closed all the time, but the events of that night kept replaying in his mind. He would see the corpse of his friend Thomas, his blood-soaked eyes staring at him. The fire of guilt. James felt that his soul was burning. He blamed himself, believed that he had killed his friend. Every night he would wake up in his bed soaked in sweat, and he felt that Thomas's ghost was coming to kill him. The shadow of the curse. James also felt that a curse had fallen on him. He would hear strange voices calling him. He was afraid of the dark because he felt that there was someone lurking in the dark who wanted to harm him. Loneliness. James was now alone. His friends and family had turned away from him. They thought he had gone mad. James felt that he was the only man in this world who was suffering from this curse. Fear of the future. James was afraid about his future. He did not know how long this curse would follow him. He lived in fear all the time, afraid of when someone else would take his life. Physical changes. Slowly, James began to have physical changes. His eyes became sunken, and his hair had turned white. He ate very little, and he was always sick. Psychological breakdown. Eventually, James had a mental breakdown. He went insane and was admitted to a mental hospital. Years of struggle. Years passed. James got married, had children, but the shadow of that terrible night never left his mind. He always lived in fear, afraid that he was cursed. He felt lonely, as if he was isolated from the world. Christmas night. A final effort. Now it was Christmas night, and James was close to his death. He knew it was the end, but he wanted to tell his story so that the world would know about that terrible night, so that no one else would make the same mistake. The mystery of the curse. The mystery of James's curse was never solved. Some believed it was an ancient curse written in that book. Some believed it was the curse of a ghost who punished James for killing his friend. And some believed it was all a figment of James's mind. James's voice gradually grew weak. "I think," he said, That night, I not only lost my friend, but also my soul. His eyes closed and a silence descended. Was James really cursed? Was his friend's death an accident or the result of magic? No one knew the answer to these questions. A strange chill engulfed the mansion, as if some invisible power was still present there. End of story. James died in the mental hospital. Even after his death, strange events continued to happen in the mansion. People said that James' ghost keeps wandering in the mansion, and he haunts those who visit that mansion. This story tells us how dangerous magic and curses can be. We should never play with unknown powers.